If you have any further questions, contact me on LinkedIn, online. If you'd like to connect with Don, Don's on Codera. I'm sure you'll see some of his posts quite often, but that would be great. And then the presentation deck will be available at the end of the series, so look forward to that. Okay, so for the May training, the May webinars, we're actually in our second week now. We had ins and outs of data modeling. I didn't see too many people at 8 o'clock on Monday morning about writing business definitions and defining business concepts. So that was really exciting. I don't know if any of you have seen the post. And then we have big data on, we'll have this one, and then CDMP Q&A tomorrow. Big data on Monday, data ethics, and next week is just about every single day is packed in. On the big data one, I'll be talking about data value realization and establishing the capability of data value and data products within an organization. And then we're going to the training for this month. The last training is next week. Debbie, I don't know if there are any spots open for CDMP for certification. She's on hold. But if you do need and you are interested in doing the course next week, please give us a shout. Then we have the June course for CDMP certification. The reason for the gap in between here is because I'll be on my motorbike in the USA. So there'll be nothing really happening in between there. So just having a break.
Very exciting.
Yeah, it's really looking forward to it. Now, this is an announcement. 1st of December 2022. This is a free conference, and it's free for any DAMA EMEA chapter. So if you're part of DAMA South Africa and you've paid your fees and stuff like that, you'll be able to access that for free. Really nice chapter, some really interesting stuff. And if you go onto the link, you'll be able to also propose if you'd like to present, be a speaker, or if you just want to attend. And then if you want to attend, they will contact me and we'll just confirm that you are a member, and then you should be good to go. So that's the 1st of December. It was the same time last year. And you can see some of the speakers and the attendees. So we can see we're doing well. We've got Stanbic, we've got Nedbank, we've got BankServe Africa. So we actually got three of the images there, which is fantastic. And we'd like to have a lot more. Okay. So guys, if you would like to, we will be doing a post. I will be getting Debbie to do a post around this as well. Okay, so this is the series, and I think I've said enough now, and we'll hand over to Don. This week, we're doing EconData for data citizens. Don, thank you very much again for all your effort and your work.
No problem, Howard. Let me just load. Excellent. So as Howard said, sorry, I just want to bring this up. Today, what we're going to be doing is presenting EconData as a use case from the perspective of data citizens. So for those of you who weren't with us last week, this is the second in the series of 4 this month, where we're going to be presenting the value proposition that EconData represents to different data personas, in this case, data citizens. Now, there are lots of different definitions of what a data citizen is. A common one, which has been advanced by Gartner in particular, is that data citizens are those who are responsible for creating and generating models that are used for advanced analytics. But there's also the fact that the word citizen is included in that term is meant to emphasize that that these are employees of a business, for example, who have access to corporate data, but that that access also comes with responsibilities. So as I'm going to, as I'll emphasize later, that there are important governance principles that apply from the perspective of a data citizen. So just as by way of summary, what I'm going to focus on today is viewing EconData from the perspective of a data product platform. And the definition of a data product platform is really a hub for all of the different data products of an enterprise or an institution. And I'm going to explain how the EconData infrastructure can perform that function from the perspective of a data citizen. I'm going to talk about how EconData enables one to optimize data processes in a way that is relevant to the ultimate user of data, and how particularly the use of the SDMX information model helps to enhance data stewardship. Then I'll show you a couple of examples of how one can think about measuring the value of data in terms of the analytics that it produces and the cost savings it can produce, or the revenue that it can generate. And then I'll show you a couple of examples of how data can help you connect to your data customers. So just, I'd like to start by discussing the product data platform idea. Now, the idea of a data product platform is that it is about enabling businesses and institutions to get the most value out of their data products, all in one system, irrespective of the format that the data is in or the quality of the data. So it's all about empowering data citizens to use data using whatever tools they'd like to use. So it's about creating that capability of advanced analytics. And so I'd like to just describe a couple of the aspects of data product platforms. These differ depending on the conceptions, but the basic principle is that it is all about insulating domain owners of data from the ultimate use of data, so that you can create infrastructure that enables discovery of data from different sources and use of data using different tools without having to create a centralized database itself. But what's crucially important is the ability to centralize the governance around the data. So what's important, there are a couple of key principles that are often talked about in the context of data product platforms. So there are 5 of them. The first is that the data on a data product platform is addressable. The second is that the data is trustworthy. The third is that the data is self-describing. The fourth is that it's integrated. And the fifth is secure. So I'll just talk through those quickly. So what's important about the data being addressable is that individual data products must be able to be identified with a unique name using a common nomenclature. So, if you're using data programmatically, that's particularly important. You want, as a user, to know that the data is trustworthy. So you want to know that the data from a specific database, you want to be able to assess the quality of the data, understand what it means. You might want to be able to see the data lineage and the transformations associated with a specific data series. Self-describing is also incredibly important within a specific business. So that means that whether a customer is able to use data without having to go back to the domain owner of the data to tell them what the data means. So can users locate data? Can they make sense of the data, particularly in the context of a business? So can they use business schema to understand how the data fits in and what it means? The fourth one is the integration of the data. Can the data be, is there operability between the data? Can the data be shared between independent products? How do you bring the data together for analytics purposes? Then the last one, security, is are you able to create user level access based on role? Can you have central centrally regulated policies and security standards for the data to be accessed. And so that's really inbuilt into the way that we use EconData. So EconData creates the ability to discover data, to look inside the data catalog, to see what is available, to see what the data definitions are, to see lots of information around the metadata of individual series and concepts, and then to enable a user to access the platform themselves. So self-service is an incredibly important principle, and then to enable users to use whatever applications they would like to use to look at to look and analyze data. So different business intelligence tools, or to use different methodologies for analytics. And really, that's user determined depending on the specific application. But it's all about enabling users to use native methods to consume data and analyze it. So that's the idea of a data product platform, and that is also the way that we conceptualize the EconData platform. I'd like to say a little bit about
Sorry, Tom.
Go ahead, Howard.
Could I ask a question?
Of course.
A lot of what you mentioned now is also brought up or described in data democratization. And you've also used that term. So I'm assuming your platform is dealing with all of these issues together. Is there anything that you haven't dealt with as far as democratization, or can we basically, from most of what I understand, you've said this is data democratization?
I think so. It does. What data democratization means will differ depending on different people. So I think from the perspective of a data citizen, really in this case, what it's about is making data that's in the public domain in particular available in a common form that can be easily consumed, is auto-updated. So yes, it's about access to the right data. It's about access in the right form that's easily usable. It's about the freedom of how to use and interact with the data. So the ability to use different ways to extract the data in different forms, use different software to model to use the data for modeling, for example.
Right. Yeah, I think they listed 4 things. It was the access, but they kept on saying it's not just access. It also talks to empowering the user, providing them with tools. It talks about the comfort of the users in accessing the data. And I can't remember the last one, but it seems like, you've covered all of the different functionality there as well.
Exactly. And I think it's also worth emphasizing this covers not just public domain data. The same way of work can be used to access proprietary or third-party data. And so really it's about access to the right information that is needed to perform the functions that matter to a specific data citizen.
Okay, thank you.
I think that this follows on nicely from Howard's question. From a data management perspective, it is really important to be able to extract the right data, to be able to understand the data source, to be able to automate processes, and to follow, to be able to have codified processes that are followed in the management of data explicitly for use in models or use in other processes. So it is about being able to know that the data has been transformed in standardized ways, and being able to have metadata that explains how that was done, and because EconData is based on SDMX information format, that's all baked into the way that data series are structured in the platform and managed. So you know that the data that you're looking at is valid within the definitions and the structures of the data that are defined in the registry. You know what the access constraints are, and you can, and that's visible to a user. It means that you can also report on that. So if you're from data steward perspective, that's very valuable, and that helps to reinforce the trust that users have in the underlying data, and add that and in the security of the access to that data. So, and of course that helps institutions mitigate the risks associated with data access and data use, but also from the user perspective, can help reinforce trust that you're using the right data, and can therefore trust the results of the models that you're producing. And so this is exactly, this does, is all about data democratization, about the dissemination of information that's needed, ultimately the publication of the analytics from that information, recognizing the dynamic nature of data in particular. So the fact that the data is updated, and you need to be able to update results, and easily update the insights that come from data in a way that you can trust the outcomes that are produced, and you enable users, you empower users to use whatever tools that they like. I'd like to say a little bit more about quality measurement, because this is really important from the perspective of a data citizen. You want to know if a data source comes from an authoritative source. In the context of economic data, you can often have multiple different sources of data for the same type of economic concept. So for example, in the case of wage data, you can get data on wages from Statistics South Africa from multiple different surveys. So you can, for example, get data from the QES, or the quarterly enterprise survey, or you can get data from the household survey, HLFS. And even though both of those will provide measures of wages, there'd be slight definitional differences in the concepts, and there'd be methodological differences in the way that data is constructed. And as a result, it's really important for a user to understand where the data has come from, what the definitions are that have been applied to construct that concept. And so that, because if you're going to be using that data and models, you might get quite different results depending on the source that you've used. And it's really important for a user to be able to understand whether they're using the right data, and to understand how the results that they're getting may be affected by the specific data definitions that have been used. And in a similar way, it's also, and it's particularly important in an economic context, where data often have to be transformed in appropriate ways for use in models. So seasonal adjustment is a really good example. And there are different ways to apply seasonal adjustment. You could also have an official seasonal adjustment applied by the statistical agency. And so you want to, as a user, understand what transformations have been applied, who applied those transformations, and you want to be able to assess if those transformations are of good quality, because that affects the quality of the modeling output that you're going to be getting, and the appropriateness of the way that you treat the data and models. You're also really interested, if you are a modeler, in the data lineage of the data. So being able to look at all the transformations that have been applied, who has access, anyone who's done any transformations on the data, and being able to understand that process. Then, in the context of modeling, it's also really important to know whether the treatment of data in a specific model has been appropriate. So if you're a policymaker, for example, if you have used the wrong data source when estimating a specific type of model and providing a forecast, there may be, it might undermine the value that policymakers see from the model because they don't believe that you've used the right data source. So being able to communicate that you've used the right data for the right in that specific application is incredibly important. And being able to assess that you've used the right data in a specific model is important. Then there are many features that are other features that are important in this context, like being able to actually produce quality metrics of a specific series and attach that as metadata to data as it's being managed in the platform, which is one of the key advantages of using an SDMX way of doing things. And also SDMX has, because of the way that data is formatted and the data structures are applied, means that you can only access data that's already been validated, and so it already eliminates the possibility of there being mistakes and data that's incorrectly loaded. So there's a validation process that's implicit in the way that we manage the data on EconData. Then this is also one of the key features that we're busy developing and hope to add in future, is the ability to actually have a quality assessment from a statistical perspective available all the time for series, so that you can actually assess whether there's residual seasonality in a specific data series, or if there are any other statistical problems that, from a modeling perspective, are important to flag before use. So just by way of example, you can see here in EconData that we explicitly flag whether a series has been seasonally adjusted, and you can look into the metadata tab and see where the data is from, and as a result understand whether this is an official seasonal adjustment, for example. Just briefly, I'd like to speak a little bit about how to think about the value of data from different perspectives. Now, what's really important in communicating the value of data is being able to boil the value of data down into tangible measures and metrics. Now, I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of how one can think about the value of data from the perspective of a data citizen. And the first relates to usage, and our EconData platform allows one to measure many of these concepts, and so actually track value over time. So, for example, in the case of usage, one could look at how many active users you have. You can produce usage statistics, and then you can boil the value from a usage perspective down to the number of hours someone spent on the platform, what they've used, and you can also understand from a business perspective what are the most commonly used data sets, and how much time people are spending on specific activities. From a quality perspective, there are a number of metrics that one could create. You could think about the accuracy improvement that one attains from the use of a specific data platform. And one of the things that we hope to develop is the ability to actually assess the quality of the data that you use in models by doing statistical assessment of the actual underlying series. But you could also demonstrate things like how much time you've saved someone by providing a platform that centralizes access. So in our case, by way of example, the platform hosts bank balance sheet information from regulatory forms that are only available on as a monthly snapshot from the regulator. So if you had to manually compile time series of the 17,000 economic concepts that are in those balance sheet forms, it would take you months of work full time to generate the time series for use for analytics. Now, the value of EconData is that that is available to everyone, and it's available on an updated basis every month. And so the amount of time saved by having EconData perform that wrangling function for you is immense from the perspective of an individual user. It enables analytics that simply would not have been available to many of the users otherwise. In terms of completeness, again, one of the key value benefits of EconData is the availability to get the same economic concepts from the authoritative sources on a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis as they're updated by the official from official sources, and being able to knowing that that data is correct and is up to date. One can also measure the economic value of data from a production cost perspective. So you could actually look at the actual cost of acquiring the actual data, accessing a platform, or managing, or the benefits that a platform provide to help an institution mature its data management. Now, in our case, the EconData is provided free of charge to the public, but there are proprietary services that do the same, and one could actually look at what those subscriptions cost, and they vary, but in some cases they could be very meaningful for data that is already in the public domain, but isn't structured in a way that is easy to use for users. One could also think about this from a cost reduction perspective. So the value in having the ability to automate any workflows that relate to South African data. So the ability that the fact that you are saving individual users from repetitive work every month by enabling them to update their models or update their dashboards as data is updated without having to have manual processes. So you could actually think about the number of hours saved per individual or per task. From a revenue gain perspective, one could think about the data products that you can create from a platform like EconData, and you can think about the sales benefit that you get per user of those data products. And you can, as I'm going to show shortly, automate the creation of marketing material and dashboarding, which have marketing value as well. And then it's also worth pointing out from a risk management perspective that the ability to have careful data governance, centralized data governance as enabled by EconData and related technology, allows institutions to actually reduce their data management risks. And this is the kind of thing that you can actually assess on a qualitative or quantitative basis. And there are many metrics that are commonly used, which we can talk about a little bit more later.
Sorry, Don. There was a question by Esty or a comment, and I thought it's quite an interesting one. Is she actually said you'd know the amount of time, for example, that it took Byron or Rousseau to get those time series in and to refresh. So could you, for example, time saved on accessibility, that was where the question was asked, if you record the time that you've taken to do those transformations, could you almost justify that for that time series, this is what it took for us to set it up, get it into STMX, get it out of the web page from Saab or whatever it is? Do you keep measures of that so that you can actually show people the effort that it's taken and then help you in some of this costing?
I think that's a really good point. Byron, do you want to weigh in on this one?
Yeah, I don't think I have much to add to what's already been said on that point, Don.
Okay, that's. I think one of the things that's been interesting for us has been that there is certainly a setup cost for us to add content to EconData, but once you've done it, once you've gone to the effort, of deciding what the structure is going to be, what the data flow will look like for a specific data source, then it becomes much easier to update. So there's a little bit of pain in the beginning, but then it makes your life easier forever. So there's a cumulative gain that you get. And as I've said in the case of the BA forms, we've actually in some projects that we've done in the past, we had a master's student work for several months in automating at the Reserve Bank some of the access to the BA form data. So, and in that example, it really is, it's months worth of wrangling work to be able to enable once-off research. So, but what Byron has done by creating the data structures that are able to consume the BA form surveys, for example, that means that no one else has to go through that pain. And but I think it's a really good point to think about, what the explicit time saving is. Of course, the other benefit here is that we actually get better and better at this over time, and so the amount of effort that it would be in the future will certainly be lower.
Sure. And
then,
sorry, Byron.
Sorry, Howard. Yeah,
No.
just to add to that, but beyond the time savings, the fact that you've got this one source that everybody is drawing from means that you've got many more eyes on the data, which if there are any problems in the data, it's much more likely to be picked up. And then once solved, it's solved for everybody simultaneously.
Yeah, it's almost that the amount of maturity of the time series of the data product is also a time saved. So we have some questions from Patrick and then Esti. Patrick?
Dan, did I get that name correctly? Is that Dan?
It's Don, yes.
That's right.
Yes. Perfect work there. A bit unrelated, but I just want to allude to the pain, really, of the time of processing. Recently, me and my team were looking into tailings dam storage type of modeling. So we had to go about 20 years back, processing Sentinel-2 satellite imagery. So that type of processing took a while ago. So I just got excited when you touched on the efficiency in terms of time. Since we've already achieved this, it took us a bit of hours. If we were to publish this accessible to someone else, we need to do a bit of population modeling over that period in the context of tailing dams and storage facilities further. They wouldn't have to go through that pain. And our machine learning thingy are already vetted. So yeah, I'm just adding a point on the value of the time there. I know that pain, and yeah.
And perhaps you should reach out to me. I'd love to hear a bit more about what you've done, because part of what we want for EconData is for it really to be a platform where people also share data. So if there's data that you could make available to others, that will enable others to replicate the work that you've done, or to build on top of it, that we'd love to be able to do that. We see EconData as being part of this, not just the open data movement, but also there's a movement for creation of research data sets to enable replicability of research results, but also to enable researchers to actually benefit from each other's work in exactly the way that you've described.
Perfect. I'll do it. Thank you.
Thanks. So there is Esti. I know we got 15 minutes left. Esti, can we
rather continue.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm close to wrapping up. So one of the things that's always been front of brain for us is the ability to enable users to use the data in whatever tool that they want. So here's an example on the left of how you can use Excel to interpret or use data and create other content. But the platform also allows you, for example, to download an R script that helps you download the data programmatically, but also update it as new data comes out. So really, our intention is to make data accessible over time to users in a variety of different forms and to enable use of different analytical tools. We also are really focused on connecting to data customers, and here are a couple of examples of blog posts that we produce using publicly available data. Now, we do a daily blog post on our website, but you can also access it on LinkedIn if you follow us there. And what we're trying to do is really demonstrate the insights that you can get out of public domain data, both from a policy perspective and from the perspective of a data scientist that's trying to understand industry developments or development in the South African economy. Then we regularly post technical blog tutorials on our EconData blog. And here is an example of one that Byron did that describes how one can use EconData to automate a forecasting model. And this demonstrates how we are trying to get users to use the platform in whatever way they want to automate workflows that use South African data. And here's just a summary of the use case that I've described. I think the most important, maybe I should just say a little bit about how to think about this diagram. So each week, what we're doing each week as part of this month's series, we're presenting on how EconData helps different data personas think about what the platform offers to them. So why should they be motivated to use EconData? What do they need to do or to understand? What do they need? When do they need to be able to use the platform? How is the platform used in an institution or an organization? And how does the use of the platform actually work? From the perspective of a data citizen, really EconData represents a hub of a centralized hub that allows you to access data from different sources. In exactly the same way as EconData just enables data access to public domain data, one can also expand this to include access to third-party and proprietary data in exactly the same way. The key benefit is that it enables the workflows that users want to automate that use this kind of data. This can be done easily, saving not just time on updating, but also time in wrangling the data in the first instance. And EconData provides, because of its SDMX base, provides quality assurance and codified process flows that are really beneficial, not just from a kind of data stewardship perspective, but by ensuring that the data citizen knows that the data comes from an authoritative source and is accurate. And as I've shown, it makes it easy to not just visualize the insights gained from data by using models or summarizing data, but also it provides some very useful governance around the management of publication and the use of different tools for data analytics. I think I'll stop there. Thank you, Howard.
Thanks, Don. So ST, you can ask as many questions as you like now.
Yeah, that was quite funny. Yeah, it's almost a thing on you touching on the research aspect as well of it. But the time aspect, like we know it takes a lot of time, but quantifying to a manager exactly how much time that takes, because everything takes longer than you think it's going to take. Like, I mean, we estimate, and then at the end, it's like, no, we took about double the time because you don't know. So if you can say, oh, we've spent 1,000 hours on that, for how much ever you charge for companies to access this data, for them to pay somebody 1,000 hours worth of work to go and redo something that has been done and checked is significant. It's huge. No, so I'm just really excited about this. And from a research perspective, so that's why I commented on like the industrial engineering conference. That was such a big discussion point on why students spend so much time data wrangling their items that they don't get to the actual research part they need to get to, and specifically South African data. So I think you guys are doing amazing work for, like, I think academic work in general, because otherwise every student has to go through this pain schlep by themselves and again, and it's not necessary. So no, I think this is really cool.
Great, thank you, Esty.
Great. So I was keen to maybe just to ask Rousseau to add some of his perspectives, because maybe if I'm correct, Rousseau, I think you are working a lot with the data, you connecting whatever programs or whatever it is, and I'm assuming that's typically the role you're playing, Rousseau, is where Byron is getting the data in, making sure all the time series has got the metadata, and then you are making use of it. Is that a correct assessment of how you guys are working?
To some extent, yes. Although Byron is a bit of a unicorn in that he can actually do what I do as well and do it better, probably.
Right.
So yeah, to some extent that's true. But what this really is for me a big thing is just that it actually allows you to have better pipelines and to streamline them a lot better, because as a modeler or somebody that's more interested in the analytical side of it, it's immensely frustrating when you're starting on a project and you have to struggle through wondering what data it is that you're looking at, what is the quality of the data that you are working with. And sometimes, on projects, that job falls on you as the modeler or as the analyst to actually gather the data yourself. And without a platform like this, it just makes that job a lot more difficult.
Right. Thank you. And I mean, I think one of the screens that Don put up last week was the ability to access it from R, from Excel, from Python, from Power BI. Are you finding yourself having, and I didn't know that you were looking at putting a dashboard together. I understand you didn't have all the time, but just in terms of the improvement and the efficiency that you've gained, I'm assuming there's lots of value there as well.
Yes, it's massive. It's also just, it's not just on the fact that if you're thinking about some of the other traditional platforms that is out there, it is frustrating having to download the data in an Excel format, then dropping that somewhere on a drive, then going back to R, importing it into R, and then or Python for that matter. And then there's always frustrations when you import it. Some of the date fields don't match correctly. It doesn't read empty spaces the way that you expected it to do, or some of the sheet names are messy, things like that. And this really takes the pain away from that. It makes it a lot faster. But the bigger part for me is when you have to repeat analysis, and that's really where you can see the power of this, because the data always comes in the exact same way. So whatever code or functions I set up, its structures are always the same, and I know what it's going to look like when it comes in.
Okay.
So yeah, that's where this saves me a ton of time.
Right.
I think what Rousseau's saying is this turns a data citizen into a super data citizen.
Yeah, exactly.
Super Rousseau. Excellent. So we got another question from Esty. She asked last week about the branching strategy. You mentioned a little bit in terms of data lineage, branching the time series. I'm assuming, for example, if you changed your seasonal adjustment and things like that, Is that visualized in some way? How are you handling that?
I think this is one for Byron.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure I fully understand what is meant by the question. So you're asking.
Can I then maybe
yeah,
jump in?
go ahead.
So meant with the question, it's almost from a GitHub or Git perspective in general. Like, how do you branch that type of data if you've not changed the model or you come to know more things? How do you handle that?
Yeah, so generally what happens is that the data, each sort of broader data concept is described by a data structure definition. And there's a versioning on all of these structures. So if the definitions and attributes attached to the data change to an extent which is no longer compatible with the previous definition, then a new definition will be created and the version will then be incremented.
It's on your side, right? You guys do that part. You keep track of that.
Correct. Correct. And then in terms of the data vintages, that there's a mechanism there that's something more, maybe a bit more akin to the idea of what Git does. So basically, as new data gets pushed into the data repository, it gets put into a staging area. And then at some point when it is considered final, it'll be released as a vintage and get a description and a release date. And then that becomes a sort of immutable, permanent snapshot of the data.
Or do you keep track of on like the database of like when that happens? Like you keep
Yes,
track
yes,
of,
yes.
okay, that happened that day, kind of order.
Yeah, it's all time stamped and documented within the database.
So I think ST as well, I think the important thing, and Don, please correct me if I'm wrong, but they're also encouraging people to use the platform themselves. So when you say you are doing it, any researcher that comes along and starts to contribute data, they would need to know how to branch or change the versions or whatever it is of the time series. So it will be a set of governance processes and each person working on owning a data set or owning a time series, they would manage that themselves. Am I correct, Don?
Yes,
Correct.
that's right.
So
And
it's
so
going to be a lot like open source projects, like, dev open source projects where somebody owns a certain part, looks after that. Different people can change things, but yes, somebody responsible. Okay, cool.
That's right. We foresee a couple of different ways that this would work. We're busy negotiating with a couple of public institutions to curate data on their behalf that will be in the public domain that's not at the moment. And our hope is that, by following this way of doing things, we can make sure that we have publicly accessible series that are, of high quality and, well described with detailed metadata. But we'd also like to have a more distributed way of doing things where users themselves actually help us to expand the amount of data that's in the public domain and do it in a way that actually really enables quality assessment and understanding of the data by using that SDMX way of describing the data and structuring it.
Excellent. You had another question there, ST.
I was curious about what the front end is built on, if I could know.
Yeah, so the front end is it's a mix of technologies really, but the base is it's a React app. Yeah, so JavaScript.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions from anybody else? ST's. I know I postponed you and you did well. Any other questions, observations? Okay. Great. Thank you very much, Patrick. Anything from your side? I know you're doing a lot. Patrick, it would be nice to know, are you also fighting with these similar issues that have been mentioned that Don has been presenting? If you're working with all those time series, are you struggling with the same issues? No. Okay, not getting any answers there. Fantastic. Don, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate this, going through it all and getting us to understand what you're providing and how we can focus on using the platform. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
There
everyone.
was-
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Have a great evening. Cheers.
Byron?
Yes.
There was a question there. Sorry, I didn't see it. Someone asked, have you considered using Django?
So for the backend, we're using Clojure, which is built on top of or how shall I put it? It compiles to Java bytecode. So basically, it runs on the JVM.
Right.
And the reason why that's a great fit for us is just access to the various Java libraries and ecosystems and sort of enterprise-ready code. So yeah, but Django is a great option as well. But you know, at some point these decisions become a little bit arbitrary.
Sure. Okay, great. Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Bye.